So my intention for this tonight is, excuse me, is to really introduce you, give you an overview of the course, and basically give you a feel for the first session of the course. And I like to make it where you have something that you can do and take home that's useful. So this picture will have a lot more meaning as we go through the class. This is an illustration of cells, the fabric of the cells that I'm going to talk a lot about. And this is from a Buddhist magazine that also shows the idea that we're strings. And that theme plays through basically the whole course, and you'll see especially why today. So the goal for me teaching this material is basically for you to see differently, to be able to use your eyes and your heart to understand things differently. We're explorers. I've always said that I'm an inner space explorer. So that's, we're going to get some new vision to do that. Okay, play. Let's, okay. And how I expanded my vision. I'm trained as a biochemist, so I really never paid attention to anything living. It was just the chemicals of life that I was interested in. And then when I went to the University of California Medical School as a postdoctoral fellow, I got into the microscope because that was the work I started doing as a research scientist. And it was just, you know, when you practice something, it works when nobody's there. Okay, so my first experience with the microscope was looking at human white blood cells. And I'll get into the next slide why. And I also started looking through the microscope at how molecules appear, what the story of the molecules are. So that becomes, the vision gets expanded, not just from our cellular universe, but from the molecules that make up the cells. She says she knows how to do this. Okay. So here's a normal white blood cell. It's the first line of defense against infection. And when I saw, that was probably the first living cell I saw under the microscope, I was astounded. I couldn't believe that living cells, actually, I wasn't even thinking of intelligence. I was just thinking, wow, this is amazing that this white blood cell knows that there's something different in its environment and is able to go after it. And I could watch the cell move on the slide and engulf or embrace, if you will, this other entity. And this is a human cell. It's able to recognize this is a red blood cell from a sheep. And if it was a bacteria, it would take the bacteria in and kill it and digest it. And here it is able to take it in, you can see, and it probably over time would break this down. But it was one of those aha moments. Here I'm an agnostic scientist thinking, oh, these are not just accidentally designed. There's more to the story of our cells than I ever thought. So then, I'm sorry, this mouse works backward than what I expect. So here I'm looking at normal human blood cells, and why am I doing that? Is to be able to find out different properties of it to be able to diagnose human leukemias. One of the ahas I had early days was when you look at normal cells, they're all pretty of the same family. They pretty much look the same. They're very orderly. And then when you get into leukemia is a cancer of the white blood cells, you see they all look different. And it's the reason I was doing this. It was not so easy to diagnose these diseases. So I was trying to come up and got a lot of funding for it to develop objective criteria so that we know what kind of, there's at least 25 different kinds of leukemias, what kind of leukemia somebody had, so we could figure out the treatment. And the reason, well, the population I was working the most with to develop diagnostic tools was children's leukemias. And this little boy, I dedicate my cell book to Alvaro. He was the first one who really wanted to see cells through the microscope, and he wanted to see molecules. So I began, long story short, I began doing slideshows for kids in pediatric oncology to show them the stuff that they're made of, the beauty that they're made of. And that's a whole other story. So, and because I was working with these children in ways that I was not trained for, I'm trained as a scientist, not as a person who works with people, at least in those days, I was dealing with concepts of life and death, especially seeing some of these little children. I talk a lot about Alvaro's dying in the book. What is life and death all about? And just to put you in a little bit of my story, when it looked like Alvaro was going to die, I just didn't know how to deal with it. And there was a psychologist who worked with us, there were 3 of us who were doing weird things in pediatric oncology. Me, the slideshow lady, an art therapist, and a puppet therapist. And there was a clinical psychologist who would come work with us every once in a while to give us support. So I called him and said, I don't know how to deal with somebody dying. Nobody had died in my family yet, and Alvaro became part of my family. And basically, long story short, he was a shaman. And so I started working with him. He's still a dear friend I work with. And I began asking deeper questions. How did life begin? And this was one of my first art pieces, actually, merging the microscopic world of molecules and ideas and imagination. How did life begin? Where did that first cell come from? Oh, I'm sorry. You know, I just taught at Sonoma State. Let's see if I can do it better on here. And one of the complaints on the evaluations was, for 6 weeks, she still couldn't figure out the clicker, having the same thing. So is that, how did life begin? Oh, hooray. I'm not going to use the mouse. Okay. So how did life begin? Did you ever think about the beginning, that first cell? You know, we have the Big Bang, but we have no understanding where that first cell came from. And the idea that life needs a place, something came from an astrobiologist down at Santa Cruz. David Deemer said, life needs a place. Until there's a place for the genes and DNA to go, you don't get life. And I translate a lot of our understanding, my understanding of the cell, in the more sacred terms. So if life needs a place, it's a sanctuary. What does that sanctuary look like? Well, let's see how it's even formed. So we get the molecules, we'll see how they manage to merge to create that place. And we need a place for where the divine spark of life, whatever you believe, we need that divine spark, a place for that spark to land. So in the beginning, this is my myth of how the first cell was formed. In the beginning, so we've got swirling waters. It's probably more like swirling mud. We have molecules. The molecules have to embrace, and the molecules that are embracing to form that container, that place for cells, are hydrocarbons, are fats. So they've come together, they've merged together, and they've formed this container. So we can see the outside of the cell is, and it creates the container. And in the first lesson, we learn a lot more about this container and why it's so important. One interesting thing about the cell container, the cell membrane, as the cell ages and matures, it becomes more flexible and fluid. So as we age and mature, do we become more or less fluid? Something to think about. So how is a cell intelligent? What makes it intelligent? I have arguments with neuroscientists who say a cell can't be intelligent, they don't have a brain. Well, let's see. So everything a cell must do to survive is really its intelligence. It has to be able to recognize danger, friend or foe, just like this white blood cell we see. It's able to recognize what's not self. It has to be able to translate information into action. So it's solving problems. It has to be able to communicate with the others in its environment. How do we get rid of this virus infection? How do we make more energy when we need it? So the cells are in constant communication with each other. They need to be able to produce energy. So we get into each one of these in much more detail throughout the course. Produce energy from their food, and how do they do that? And what compromises their ability to produce energy? If you're always tired, there's something happening in the energy production part of your cells. Usually it's stress. And how do we manage that? We'll get more into that in one of the sessions. And all cells move, all cells vibrate. Every part of the cell moves and vibrates. Everything is in constant motion. We're fluid beings. We look solid. I mean, it's pretty amazing. We look solid, but we're not at all. So just consider, this is an old video I captured from the Science Museum, the Exploratorium. But just consider, we started as one fertilized cell that became two, that kept on dividing, knew how to divide, knew how to read the other signals, and create ultimately, I mean, it's pretty amazing what they're able to, they ultimately create a ball of cells. Every cell in that ball has the same genes, yet some will become brain genes, brain cells, skin cells, every other 200 kinds of cells in the body. And part of our understanding of how do they know? I mean, they all look the same, right? It's location, location, location. Where the cell is in the ball influences which genes it expresses. So the focus for tonight is your CIA, your Cellular Intelligence Agency. And what is that? I focus on two main parts of the cell. One is this drawing is an outside of the cell. And this is what the membrane, a drawing of a membrane looks like. So the outside of the cell has antenna or receiving sites, receptors that pick up the molecules of information. If you've read Bruce Lipton, he talks about the membrane, that part of the cell being really the most important part of the cell because it detects the molecules of emotion, detects the information outside the cell. But in reality, the real decision maker is this fabric of the cell inside the cell called the cytoskeleton. You might know that word or not. So these two work together. The outside takes in the information, the inside decides what to do with it. So if we're sending out, we're angry all the time, or we're feeling loving, or worried, or fearful, or peaceful, that has a chemical signature that our cells are able to recognize. At least cells that have receiving sites for those chemicals can recognize it. And just consider, your cells are listening to everything you think, feel, and even imagine. And by the way, cells in the brain don't know the difference between what's real and imagined. So here we got the outside of the cell, all these little antennae waiting for information. Now, what does that really look like when we get inside? Another illustration. And it's a common theme in this course is the shape of things influence what a cell can do. So this is now an illustration of these receptor sites. And notice in the drawing, they're all different shapes, which influences how they can respond. One cell could have 1,000 different kinds of receptors. And we'll see why in the next slide. So here we've got the cell receptors. Here we have on this side of the screen, molecules that we make when we're stressed or fearful or worried. This is adrenaline, the first molecule we make when we're really feeling stressed. And you can see it's got a very specific shape. Only receptors that can recognize the shape can respond to it. So not all cells have receptor sites for adrenaline. And what we do know is now, because of this, what's called molecular complementarity, there really needs to be a way that the receiving sites can recognize a molecule. A lot of our drugs these days are built to mimic the shape of the molecule. And molecules are more than shape, they're also vibration, but I'll get into that in another session. And a lot of our drugs these days are built to block the receptor sites. Here's an example of histamine. So histamine turns on, it's the first molecule made during inflammation. You can almost see it wants to make your nose itch or sneeze. And so it's a very different molecular receptor that will respond to this. And we have antihistamines, drugs that block this. And one thing I talk about in the course is the laws, the principles of design, the universal principles of design. One of them is, at least in terms of cellular life, one of them is a molecular complementarity, that these shapes, it's like a lock and key, except they're not fixed. This is a fixed shape, but the receptor site will wrap itself around, like embrace the molecule. And so cells work by this. A lot of the biology works by the shape of molecules embracing one another, and it's pattern recognition. And in thinking about pattern recognition, our cells can recognize different patterns of molecules. And if we link that to what we're doing psychologically, we have pattern recognition also built into our brain. Oh, I'm doing the same old thing again. I'm eating chocolate when I'm nervous, what have you. So pattern recognition is built into us at the biological level. So this is, in my humble opinion, the most important part of the cell, if there could be such a most important, is this cytoskeleton. And this is the work that came out in the late 90s by Donald Ingbar, a scientist at Harvard, put the cytoskeleton on the map. We didn't know much about the cytoskeleton other than we knew it helped the cell move, but we didn't know that it had effects on the expression of our genes and basically effects on everything. So I'll tell you a little bit about Ingbar's research. He put living cells in a plastic dish. They all had the same genes. And when cells, you put them in a plastic dish to grow, first of all, they have to attach to the dish. They get sticky. And then they have to stretch out to fill the space in the dish. When they stretch out, they're turning on the gene to reproduce. Now, when they fill the dish, they have no place else to go. So they'll start letting go of some of their attachments, no longer stretched out as much, no longer as tense. And when they let go of some of their attachments, now they can mature. So cells can't reproduce and mature at the same time. An example, if you get a viral infection, the lymphocytes, the white blood cells, have to keep on reproducing to make a bunch of lymphocytes to be able to recognize that virus. But then at the maturation stage, we've got enough lymphocytes already. We've got enough cells that can recognize the virus. Now the cells have to mature so they can make all the proteins they require to be able to get rid of the virus. So they're making antibodies, they're making chemicals called cytokines. So the maturation phase is another gene expression. And then if we talk about in the dish or in our bodies, the cells let go of all their attachments, they loosen up totally, and they program themselves to die. And programmed cell death is a normal part of our evolution, a normal part of what our cells are able to do, a normal part of their intelligence, knowing when to reproduce, knowing when to mature, knowing when to say it's time to go. So this is really a photomicrograph of cells, and you can see they're really stretched out. This, what we all are familiar with in terms of cell biology. Here's the nucleus. The outside of the membrane is less than a hair thick, so it's really, you don't really see anything in the cell membrane in this kind of photograph, but you can see the cytoskeleton. And one of the things I got so excited about with the cytoskeleton was they're strings. And until I became aware of the strings, there was no place for energy healing in the anatomy of our cells. Energy healing was something that happened in the mystical. There was the only place we thought sound affected our cells was in the brain. But now we have the strings in every cell. All the cells are able to vibrate. They all respond to sound. That's one of the reasons I started this with sound, so we can really begin to feel that our cells are capable of responding to the electromagnetic energy, electromagnetic field in ways that we have not learned in the past. Joanne, could you please turn off your, mute yourself? Thank you. And one of the key things about the expression of our cells is when they change shape and tension, that's transmitting information. So the tension in the cell, it's mechanical tension, is really important for our healing to understand that. So our cells are string instruments. Everything vibrates. Sound changes our cells, changes consciousness. And if you're looking for a quick fix, I always like quick fixes when I'm thinking of, well, what can I do to get my mind out of caca land? Well, I can play some music. So make, you know, what kind of playlists can you make to get yourself, or I can hum. We'll see why that's so important. So yeah, I've got to play with that. So when we talk about sound and vibration, we're talking about resonance. So when one cell is resonating in gratitude, it's setting up other cells in the body nearby to resonate in that state. So we can think about what's going on inside when we're in an elevated emotion state, if you will, and how else can we get there? So I keep on talking about the hum. So everything vibrates, our cells, our molecules, our atoms. The molecules have a vibrational field that we usually don't talk about. This is another quick fix. What can we do to bring our cells into alignment or attunement? Just check out for yourself, test it out. Don't believe my words. Will there be a sound, a music, a chant that brings you into a state of at-one-ment and attunement? So humming is something I talked about many years ago because there was research on humming enhancing the sense of self for people, which I talk more in detail later in the class. But Jonathan Goldman, an eminent sound healer, came out with a book last year called The Humming Effect. And in The Humming Effect, he cites all the research, all the physiologic research of the benefits of humming. It reduces stress hormones. It reduces blood pressure. It increases nitric oxide, which relaxes the blood vessels. It increases endorphins, which lowers our pain threshold. It increases oxygen in our cells, which improves the energy production. It also increases lymphatic circulation, which improves immune function and the detoxification of our cells. So your cells are listening. And what I'd like to do now is just in the next, for a few minutes, to practice play with hum. And how we hum, if you want to, you can unmute yourself for this because it's kind of fun to hear our humming together. How you hum is you take a deep breath in, and on the exhale, you're making the sound mm. And when you play with this, you can do it as high and as low and direct the sound, but make the hum that's as loud as possible. And if you can get the dog humming, that would be great too. So we'll do 3. So take a deep breath in. If you'd all now mute yourself again, please. Thank you. Thank you. Take you into your cellular universe, and then for a short meditation. So let yourself be comfortable where you're sitting, or if you're lying down. Take a few deep breaths in. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Relax your shoulders. Notice the temperature of your hands. Notice if there's any place where you're feeling tension or tight. And just let your body go. Let your mind go. Take another deep breath in. And on the exhale, relax even more. We'll take in one more deep breath. And feel your body. Become aware of your body. Feel where your body is touching the chair. Your feet may be touching the floor. Your hands may be touching each other. Just create an awareness. That's part of intelligence, an awareness of where you are in this moment. And then bring your awareness, your attention to what feels like your center, the center of you right now. Where is that place? And breathe into your center. And then bring your attention to what feels like the outside of you. Where's your outer edge? And breathe to that place. And you can imagine that the center is the center of your cellular universe. And the outer edge is your cell membrane. And now we're going to bring them together with sound. So we're going to do the hum again. We're going to do 3 hums and follow your own breath. Don't follow my breath. So on the inhale and the exhale, you're humming, and let your cells be filled with the sound. Let's begin. Mm. And just notice what you feel in the silence. And know that trillions of cells have made this experience possible. Thank your cells. Thank them for holding you, for humming you, for being you. And you put your hand on your heart in gratitude and feel grateful for the cellular universe that allows you to be you. When you're ready, open your eyes. Come back to our cell circle. And you might need to pat yourself on the top of your head if you went a little far out there. Another gesture you can use is press your thumb and first finger together to bring yourself back, but it also anchors this experience, which I talk more about later in the course. So open your eyes. We're back. And a reminder that our body responds to whatever we're feeling. We are our bodies, even if we're learning other than that. And a way to test it is if you just make a gentle fist and squeeze it and just notice where you feel the tension in your fist. Notice how that tension actually seems to move up your arm. And you might also become aware of where else are you spreading that tension. So everything is connected in our body, mind. And when we're feeling this tension of stress or anxiety, all the cells are responding. And basically, we can think about the cytoskeleton as the connective tissue in the cell. And there's been considerable research, we see in this diagram, showing the connective tissue pulling on the cytoskeleton of their cells. So when we're feeling that angst that is causing our jaw to tighten or our shoulders to tighten, every part of our body is responding. So beyond stress, beyond intelligence, there's also the notion that our cells carry consciousness. Some of this work came out from Stuart Hameroff, anesthesiologist in Arizona, and Roger Penrose, a physicist, who are looking at neurons, saying that when you block the neurons, the microtubules, the cytoskeleton in the neurons, we lose everyday consciousness. When you block it with anesthetics, you lose everyday consciousness. Well, it's much more than anesthetics. Another doorway into cells as consciousness came from two places originally. One was from Carlos Castaneda, who came up with something called magical passes, which he said were exercises passed down from the ancient sorcerers of Mexico. And he called these tensegrity practices, which I talk more about tensegrity later. But what he said, that these are practices where you're changing the tension and the movement in your body. He said you're changing consciousness, you're also changing the energy in your body. And then the other doorway into this information came from a anthropologist, Felicitas Goodman, who was interested in pre-Columbian art. And she was aware of these different postures that she saw in the pre-Columbian art. And she said, what was going on in the art? Was this about changing consciousness? So she had her graduate students adapt different postures for a half hour or so, and saw that in fact their consciousness changed. And if we look at Buddha, we see that there's certain hand mudras, certain hand postures, positions that influence the peacefulness, if you will. And a gamer, Jane McDougall, came up with the idea that if we have our hands open, upward, palms facing upward, that changes our consciousness and we became much more open to information. So it's another way of using our body to be able to change our mind, to be able to change how we feel. And since I learned through my body, it's useful for me to understand that I need to change my body. So what came out pretty recently in science was that the cytoskeleton, the mechanical tension on the cell, the changes are much faster than the molecular input. So changing our hands can be much faster than changing their molecules. And really keep that in mind. Getting out to walk, move your body, stretch, do yoga, etc. Use your body to change our mind and well-being. We have the abilities to do it at a cellular level. It's the consciousness and tension, intelligence in our cells. And what has made me so excited about the fabric of our cells, the matrix of our cells, is, yes, this was a drawing of the cytoskeleton from the 90s. And this picture comes from, I was on the first slide, comes from an old Buddhist magazine, Tricycle. And I was struck, I think the magazine came out before I learned about the cytoskeleton. And I was struck by, oh, well, here we've got Buddha and strings. Why is that? And so one of the themes of this course is asking the question, where does the information come from? Where do the ideas for sacred practices come from? Where did the idea for sacred wisdom come from? Why did this magazine draw Buddha with this strings throughout, a fabric throughout? Could they see inside? Could they probably couldn't name it, but were they seeing their body inside and drawing it? Why did sound become such an important ancient practice in chanting, in singing? Every culture has music. And then we see now the practices that are brought to the West, Tai Chi and Qigong, yoga, are practices that work with energy, that change the shape of our bodies, if you will. So I like to say all the ancient practices are cellular practices. Our ancestors way back when were able to come up with these ideas and bring it forward. And I'm saying I'm probably 15 more minutes in the course in the intro before we have questions, and I hope that's okay for people. So along with the practices, I asked the question, did people see symbols? Did people see our cells in their body and create their sacred art and symbols as that? Here we have an Aztec wheel. Here we have a medicine wheel. When I saw this medicine wheel painted on a cave wall, it immediately looked like a cell to me, because here we've got the nucleus, here we've got the receptor sites on the outside, and here we've got the cytoskeleton that's directing the cell. Maybe people really saw that and had brought this information forward. And then what about the idea for a mandala? Where did that come from? It wasn't just simply Carl Jung telling us to draw them. This looks like a mandala, but actually what this is a computer graphic of DNA, looking at DNA from the top. And it's definitely has a lot of different information in this, in our cells and molecules. So I like to use our medicine wheel. Some of the class depends on the questions, may get into using our cells as a medicine wheel, because I've often thought of that, using our body, what the directions are. key mantra for this whole course is cells are always in the present moment. They're always in the now, always in the now. The only thing that takes our cells out of now is what's going on in our mind and our body. So if you can think about that and remember that when your mind is going off in some imaginary worry or real worry, bring them back. The cells are in now. So what message do you want to broadcast to your cells? It's always a good question to ask yourself. What am I sending to my cells right now? Well, we want to celebrate, don't we? And we want to celebrate gratitude always. Gratitude brings us into a state of attunement. So two different ideas on imagination. Worry is a total waste of imagination. The true sign of intelligence, according to Albert Einstein, is not knowledge, but imagination. And the body and cells, the brain, don't know the difference between what's real and imagined. So keep that also in your mind. So ways of healing, to be able to get to know ourselves. Letting go is an important one that I'll talk more about as we get into the class. Letting in is also important for what do we let in? What are we discriminating against? Can we trust and love? Can we trust our imagination? And what's our legacy? What are we? Our cells have a purpose. What's your purpose? So the oldest form of healing is shamanism, being able to engage the imagination, being able to change your consciousness at will. And we will use some of that practices in the class. And another reminder from Buddha, in the end, what matters most is how well did you love? How well did you live? How well did you learn to let go? And remember, the cells let go in order to mature. So it's often said we need spiritual maturity by letting go of our attachments. Same for ourselves. So how do we tune in? We engage with our cells' wisdom, and I want you to fall in love. I want you to have a love affair, a romance with your cellular universe. You think I could say that better? To be able to awaken and listen and use sound. When I started teaching the stress class online, it was the first time I'd ever talked about humming and the physiology. One of my students was a nurse who was also an energy healer, and she could not get her mind to focus. She complained about being a multitasker, and with all the things she knew, there was nothing that ever brought her into the present moment, to get to focus, to not multitask. And she, I coached the first round of students, and she said the first couple of minutes she started humming, it brought her into that moment of, oh, I don't have anything else going on in my mind. And we've stayed in touch, and she still has that experience. A few minutes of humming brought her into the now. And a reminder, so take that home and play with it. It's your gift of your cells. And everything is an inside job. How we're healing, how we feel happy or not, how well we're aging, it's all takes inside and what's inside us. Our cells, our molecules, our consciousness. So a simple little list of how do we nurture ourselves? Play music, soothe your soul, make a playlist. So, I had to do that for when I'm not a morning person, so I made a playlist of what gets me lively and joyful more in the morning. And remember that your cells are vibrating, resonating with whatever you're feeding them. So cellular intelligence, to bring it all back, we activate our inner wisdom. It's a partnership that basically we have with ourselves. It's a partnership of thoughts and actions, mind and body, intention, stress and gratitude. Which am I choosing? The ability to be able to listen. Cells do that. We need to be able to listen to our bodies. Move and stretch are important. We know that the sitting is the new smoking, so it's really important to get up, use a mindfulness bell on your computer, get up and stretch, move, breathe, and use sound. Go within, breathe, and you'll learn why breathing really is one of the key healing tools we have in terms of making energy at a cellular level. So this is a handout I can send to people on the call if we want. What are lessons from ourselves? To embrace life, to create sanctuary, to recognize ourself and other, and how do we do that? To be able to move with purpose, to listen, to communicate, to connect, to be able to sustain energy, to learn and love. These are all lessons from ourselves, and we can take advantage of that. Let's I think I'm going to take advantage of that being the last slide. Oh, God. Oh, and cellular intelligence is laughter, being able to laugh at yourself. This forward and after movement of the slides works so totally differently when it's on Zoom than when it does just on my computer. So Rumi has a wonderful quote to remind us: you have no need to travel anywhere. Journey within yourself. Enter a mind of rubies and bathe in the splendor of your own light. Your cells do respond to light as we do. And another ancient wisdom proverb: the secret to living well and longer is eat half, walk double, laugh triple, and love without measure. And love your cells, love your friends, love your family, love life. It's what we've got going for us right now. And so I'm going to invite you to connect with your wisdom. What will you do this week? Connect to it, connect, enliven, and love. And I'm going to stop sharing this and open questions. I know there's a lot of information. So if you want to unmute yourself and put questions in the chat. I had to shorten, obviously, I had to shorten this slideshow. Well, I was going to include other molecules related to the elements of life, but you have to take the class if you want to get more of that. It's trying to figure out how much information to put in and to make it somewhat useful in this kind of setting. So we have any questions?
I have one. My picture's not there. I'm not sure why. But when you were talking about the inner life of the spirit, what struck me was when I get an intuitive knowing, it doesn't come from my brain because I haven't thought about it, but it comes from inside. So I'm wondering if you see intuition as a cellular thing.
Well, it's interesting, Joanne. I've started thinking of, because intuition is usually positive, and I've started thinking about intuition as our soul's conversation with us. The soul is in every cell, and when we're getting an intuition, it's our soul's talking to us. That's just my opinion at this moment. I don't know if it will change or not. Hey, Tom, I haven't seen you in a long time. Oh, another stranger.
Not a stranger.
Yeah.
Dave.
Yeah. So any other questions?
I have a question. What's the difference between humming and toning? Elizabeth Laurel Keyes wrote a book many years ago in the 70s on toning. reminds me of what you're saying about humming.
So humming tends to be the one sound. Toning, we're changing
I see.
the more melody, but they may be pretty similar. The research was done that Goldman talks about. The research was done really with and the one sound, not humming a song. And toning to me is like chanting. You're going through a variety. I would think that they both change the same way, but the research was on humming. And the humming is easier for some people.
Yes.
Yeah, before they get into humor. I know when I did my very first group, God, when in the 80s or 90s, I can't remember when, it was a group with more men than women, and it was men with cancer and autoimmune diseases. And I was teaching doing visualization, and I had learned enough that it's easier to get into a meditative visualization state when you do the sound first. If you do the sound before you meditate or try to visualize, it opens the gate. And so in this course, in the first session, I started doing, actually it was chanting, it wasn't tuning. It wasn't humming. And I did this chant, and a couple guys in the group started cracking up. They said, "Oh, this is hippiedom. This is the old hippie stuff, oming with hippies." And I did the guided visualization with them. And the next week, I did not do the sound first because the first group, I couldn't handle them laughing. You know, I better not do it that way. So when I started just getting them into a guided visualization, both men asked, "Why didn't you do the sound?" I said, "Well, because you laughed. You thought it was hippie stuff." And they both said, "Well, but I was using the sound at home before I did the visualization." It's like, oh, okay. And since it was the first group I had ever done, I called people up to see, what are you doing that was, you know, in the group? Like I taught Qigong, self-massage, guided visualization, which we also will do Qigong in this class. So they, you know, the one man who had an autoimmune disease with horrible joint pain, he said the only thing he was still doing was the sound because that helped diminish his pain. And, you know, it's like one thing doesn't fit everybody. One thing doesn't fit each of us at always at the same time. So like I mentioned, I like to have a medicine bag of tricks. Sound doesn't work for me to bring me to a place of meditation or peace. Guided visualization, getting up and dancing, Qigong. There's lots of different practices that work to bring us into a place of finding our center. And we each need to know, like, what's the menu? What's my menu to choose from? For me, it's almost always understanding music will bring me someplace in a positive way. So I talk probably more and more about music. I need to start playing an instrument since we're strings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think of humming as being softer, more relaxed, and toning with intent.
Oh, interesting. Softer. Probably also easier. You don't have to remember
Words.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks for that. Any other questions? Okay.
Sondra, will you talk a little bit about the difference between your cell class and your stress class?
Okay. This new cell class is 4 sessions. I've usually taught it in a whole weekend or 6 weeks. So I'm trying to pack it all in. So the overview of the class will be getting to understand how cells communicate, cell identity, a little bit about immune function, how the cells work to protect us. We talk about, there's one session I talk some about stress, because you need to understand when we're stressed, our body uses up energy, and what's happening to get out of a stress mode, and how do our cells make energy. So there's some stress in this class. I teach Qigong as a really useful practice to be able to cultivate our energy, or another way of relaxing. And then we go into the genes, what are the legacy of our genes? How do they work? What is epigenetics? Epigenetics is how our environment changes the expression of our genes. And each class will have practices in it, and reflections, and ways to be able to make useful the information. The stress class is focused on, how do I change? There's more of that, maybe the personal focus, although I certainly ask in this first class of, well, what do you want to get out of it? Why are you taking it? Is it just to learn something, or is it something you'd like to change in your life? But in the stress class, the focus is much more of, what do you need to change to be out of stress, to be not so stress reactive? And it's 3 sessions. It was the first couple times I did it with coaching, because that helped people stay with it. I know I need accountability, and often we need accountability. But now this coaching is optional. What else? And right now the stress class is available. It's a recorded, it's an evergreen class. And if there were people that were signing up, I would do a live Q&A for it. This one is a live class with Q&A and our own Facebook page, so we can communicate with each other and connect and ask questions. So we have an ongoing circle, a tribe of folks who really want to get into the wisdom. So this has more of a focus on sacred wisdom than stress class. Stress is more practical. I consider this class practical. I've been teaching, this has been awakening your cellular intelligence. I've been teaching this for years. That's been the big over of the book, Secrets of Your Cells. And I know I want to bring in the medicine wheel. I know I want to bring in a lot of other things into this class. So it evolves, it definitely evolves. And I know Ronnie mentioned something about the elements. So this photograph behind me is a photograph of 2 minerals related to minerals in the body. And related to, there's an astrological association with minerals. And that's a whole other story. We'll do another live mini intro on the astro elements, because it's really a whole fascinating story of the minerals, and 12 mineral salts in our body actually have an affiliation with our zodiac. What does that mean? Where did that come from? What did the ancients know? Like, I keep on integrating the mystic with the scientist more and more the older I get. Each week, the older I get. So one thing I wanted to offer, because I know a lot of people don't know the difference between cells and molecules, atoms. You might not want to know it, but if anybody signs up for the class tonight, I'll send out, I wrote a chapter on nutritional biochemistry for Bowman Nutrition College. And so I know, Robin, you already signed up. I'll send you a copy of that. It's 25 pages. It really goes into almost the basic science of what's a molecule, how do they bond, what's an atom, what's pH, things you read about, but it's, I just wanted to make it as a giveaway if you want to sign up tonight. And so Any other questions?
Just a practical suggestion that when people ask a question, they put their microphone on. And when the question's done, they turn it off.
Okay. Yes, sir. Thank you. That's a good idea. Good idea. And I really appreciate you all being here. It's exciting to see so many happy faces, so many smiling faces, so many faces I know and so many I don't. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
It was an awesome teaching.
Thank you.
So I have something to add here. I have a whole lot of people that are asking for the recording. If any of you know of somebody that you wish would have been here tonight, let me know. We will send them this recording of tonight so they can kind of get an overview of what's going on. Or in the next week, if you're thinking of some questions that you went, oh, I wish I would have asked that, then ask, send me an email. We'll talk to Dr. Barrett and get some answers for you, because that's what we're here for. We're here to educate and expand all of this knowledge for the benefit of all of us. The more we all learn, the more we all gain, and the better we all are. And so share this. If I can help you with anything else, just email me directly. We've got over a week before the class starts, so we can gather more people together. And there'll be more people because there was a whole lot of people that couldn't be here tonight that will be in the class. They have to get the recording for one reason. And you can always get the recordings in the class if you can't attend the 4 sessions that will be coming up. So thank you all for being here. And if there was any technical problems that you had that I can help you with in the future, let me know what that is and we'll fix that too. Yes, Sondra.
One more thing, you can email me too, but you can go to my website, sondrabarrett.com, and activating cellular intelligence, there's a link for that under Cell Wisdom, and you can find out details about the course, as well as where it links you to Thinkific, if you want more details.
So if you sign up tonight or by the 21st, it's $100, $25 a week. Or if you wait till after that, it's $125. So you can save $25 by signing up by the 21st. Any more questions? Any more thoughts?
So Ronnie, will you
Yes.
send an email with how to sign up again? Because
Certainly, thank you. Yes.
because it's not real clear to, exactly if there's a link or just to remind everybody.
Sure. Thank you.
Then I can forward that to some other people too if you send me something.
Wonderful. I will.
Okay. That was awesome, Sondra. Really
Thank
nice.
you, Robin.
Thank you so much, Sondra.
Thank you, Sharon. That's good.
That's wonderful.
Good.
Okay, everybody have a nice evening. I'm going to click the button and say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Happy holidays.
Big hugs to everybody.
Bye.
Well, maybe I'm going to click the button that's hiding. Maybe we're supposed to stay here a while.
Yeah, we're just supposed to stay.
Right.
Thank you, Sondra.
Well, we can
and
exit. We can
Valerie.
leave meeting. Bottom right-hand corner. Leave meeting. Here we go.